Welcome to Art in the Raw, Conversations with Creative People. Tonight, I am thrilled to introduce you to artist Ray Troll. Some intelligent person came up with a new genre to describe Ray's work, which is scientific surrealism. Like to know more? Keep watching. If you're a regular here, it's great to see you. For those who are new, you might be wondering who I am. I'm your host, Ann Kelly. I've been in love with art and music about as long as I can remember. I've now been working in the professional gallery world for about 16 years now, and I started Art in the Raw about halfway through 2020 to keep people connected and inspired. If you see value in that, consider telling like-minded friends, subscribing, throw me a like, it's free and it really helps. If you'd like to know a little bit more about the show or tonight's guest, take a look at the description below. But now I'm excited to introduce you to Ray. Welcome, Ray.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm sitting here in my living room in Ketchikan, Alaska, where it's a beautiful sunny day.
I have never been there before, but I watched a little studio tour that you have on YouTube last night, and I think I would like to come visit now. It looks beautiful.
Well, that could be deceptive. You know, it usually rains here, but in pre-pandemic times, we were getting about 1 million people through here on ships and, independent travelers. From May through September, we have a lot of people from out of town. In fact, many days, there's more of them on the ships than actually live here in town. We're basically a border town, the first place you come to in Alaska on a cruise ship or flying in. So we catch them coming and going. But it's also a really great place for artists to be, because there's kind of that tourist economy, but visitor economy. I think that's really has a lot to do with the scene here.
Well, I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico, so can relate with significantly less rain.
The rain is what keeps most people at bay. Keeps us from becoming California.
You are not originally from Alaska, but you are known for, as you describe them, your fishy images. I would imagine being on the water in such a location provides extra inspiration.
Yeah, it really does. I landed here almost 40 years ago. Before I got here, fish were already kind of showing up in my artwork, but came here to be a fishmonger, someone who sells fish. Fresh out of graduate school, I had my Master of Fine Arts degree, had my undergraduate degree in printmaking. The short version is I got very inspired by the fish and I found an audience.
Now you run a gallery with your wife, Soho Coho?
The Soho Coho. I was born in New York State, so it's kind of my shout out to New York in a way, So, and then coho are one of the species of salmon that we got here. We are on a salmon spawning stream. In fact, the fish are in the creek right now doing what they do this time of year. And we are in an old house of ill repute, a bawdy house, as it were, a whorehouse. Historically, none of that going on now. Just fish are up to stuff. But anyways, yeah, my wife Michelle runs the gallery. It's about 1,000 square feet, so it's a pretty large space. We do brick and mortar retail, plus we do online stuff. And we've been in business for 30 years.
And your works can be found on paper, in museums, on t-shirts, snowboard. Seems like you're a firm believer of the art being for everyone.
I do have the Warholian factory approach in a way, like put the art out there, kind of a pop art sensibility in some ways, but surrealist at heart, the absurdist, humorous, all those things. They don't fit neatly into any one category. I do high art, maybe really high art, and low art, middlebrow art. I don't know. My printmaking background, I was doing serigraphs and etchings and engravings and that kind of thing. So having my imagery on objects has always been really of interest to me. Actually, like in the 80s, really seeing kind of arty sort of t-shirts. There are people starting to take fabric art as a medium to work with. And kind of a t-shirt line now for 40 years. I like to think of it as affordable art. I really do believe that art should be kind of egalitarian. It should be for everyone. I like to sell originals for, larger sums of money, but I really do like the idea. And you can buy a piece of my artwork for $20, and wear it.
I'm a believer in that myself. While I do work in a gallery, I kind of hate the idea that some people are intimidated and they just feel like it's kind of this elitist thing. So I always appreciate when somebody can have offerings that fit in a wide range of price points and make it friendly and affordable.
Don't get me wrong, I do love going into the, higher end galleries, but yeah, there is an attitude sometimes that's just very palpable.
Right. And work takes a
Yeah.
long time to make. So the high price points of certain pieces
Right.
are
Definitely.
necessary because, well, hey, you maybe spent several hundred hours on something.
And having run a business too, I understand what it takes. Well, my wife runs the gallery end of things, but I understand what it takes to keep the lights on, keep employees. And, we have 4 or 5 people who work for us and, keeping things moving, having to pay attention to the bottom line. We're not subsidized by any means. We have to make the rent. But I do think that I've been lucky enough to not compromise my vision. I take my artwork seriously. Since I'm self-employed and actually perfectly unemployable, I have to impose my own work ethic. So I do show up at the studio, work a 9 to 5 shift kind of thing, take a break right at lunch and then get back to work.
That's great advice for artists. There's kind of this myth of make things when you want to,
I'm
and the
inspired.
gallery
Now.
picks it up. But yeah, the best advice I've really heard is if you're going to be an artist, treat it like a job and have studio hours, the things you're describing.
And also, sometimes you show up at the studio and not much happens. That's okay.
But you showed up.
You show up. There's periods where you're between things and you're puttering, just grabbing books, sweeping the floor, cleaning up the place, waiting for the next bubble to appear in your brain. But it does inevitably. And so I've never sweated that, I've run out of ideas. They come. It's part of my DNA. It's who I am. So,
Plus, you got to sweep the floor. Somebody has to do it.
Well, yeah, I should sweep the floor a lot more often. It is sort of the ultimate man cave or whatever out there. It's out of my house and it's my own space, which I think is important too. I don't live in my work other than it's on the computer, but I don't have my own artwork in my house. It's mentally kind of fatiguing to be looking at my own artwork hanging on the walls. It's cool to literally go across the driveway, go up the stairs to my studio, have another space, work and live in that space, live and breathe it. Sometimes I'm so into it, I have to just tear myself away, have the downtime, the recharge time. You only get those 2 8-hour blocks in your life, right? The other 8-hour block is sleeping, and then 8 hours of work and 8 hours of goofing off. So,
and sounds like a very nice commute you have to work.
It is nice, yes. There's bears sometimes. You were asking about the proximity to the ocean. I'm looking at the ocean right now out my window. I have a spectacular view here in this little house we live in on the hill. There's deep forest on one side of our house and kind of surrounding it in a way, but there's also this way down the hill is the town. But 2 blocks in the other direction going up the hill is wilderness. The wilderness begins, and it's wilderness. It is, it's the same as it was 11,000 years ago. Down the hill is the eternal ocean, and it's a terrifically inspiring place. And the town is about, I joke that it's 2 blocks wide and 14 miles long, and it kind of is,
Well, I would ask you about fish as inspiration, but I know everybody asks you about that. And I kind of get it myself. I've always had an obsession with fish that I've never quite understood. And in fact, when I was in elementary school, I got in trouble in art class because in every piece of art I created, it was either fish or dice. I don't know why, but my art teacher got angry with me one day and she told me I needed to diversify in my
dice. Huh.
I don't know what the deal with the dice was. So
I have a theory.
I would like to hear that.
Well, you invited Ray Troll on your show. Watch out. It's hard to explain. An obsession doesn't make a lot of sense, but since I have been so fascinated, I have, parsed it apart. The topic is endlessly fascinating. There's so many species. I'm just curious by nature, and I, really believe in fostering curiosity and fostering fascination in the world. And I try to get others fascinated with the natural world and just the world we live in and who and what we are. But I was drawn to the fish for their beauty and their variety, and I was selling them, and then I realized there's this whole fish culture up here that has really fed this entire coast. Pacific salmon really at the heart of it, these incredible fish. So As I followed the topic deeper and deeper and deeper, I didn't let go. And now I realize there's not enough lifetimes for all this stuff. Here's the thing about the dice, though. I ended up using dice as one of the icons or little subtle symbols in some of my exhibits. I do these museum exhibits too. I do the t-shirts, but I really love museum exhibits and collaborating and making books. I did a book called Planet Ocean, Dancing to the Fossil Record with my friend Brad Matson. And I'm a paleo nut too, so prehistory really fascinates me. And I had a rudimentary understanding of how evolution happened, and I knew that there was a critical moment there where the fish crawled out of the sea. But I went deeper and deeper into that topic, and I really became kind of a semi-quasi expert or whatever on it because I just wanted to know as I was tumbling into this topic of fish. Well, let's look at those prehistoric fish. But then when you come to the realization that we are descendants of fish, when you get your head around it, we are variations on fish. All the vertebrates are basically fish. We're just modified fish. The dog under your table there is a modified fish. We're all descended. And when you're descended from something, you are that group. So if you were a Hatfield or a McCoy, you're one or the other. So the branching tree of life, where all the vertebrates on the planet, our descendants are fish. They're in the fish group. But how does that happen? Chance? Is it total chance? Is it a roll of the dice?
Mm-hmm.
Or do we want to believe that it's meant to be? Do we want to believe that there's a hand of fate? Does religion figure into this? These are all questions all of us ask. An exhibit grew out of the Dancing to the Fossil Record book. I did these various tanks, and some of them were fish tanks, and one of them had a lungfish in it. And we are more closely related to that lungfish than the lungfish is actually to other fish, which is pretty wild. But basically, it's an air-breathing fish. There's a clue. Right. Underwater, it will drown. But in the fish tank, I put all kinds of dice in the bottom of the fish tank.
No kidding.
Throughout the exhibit, as you walk from case to case, there were just these dice, like in the gravel and stuff, and at the bottom of the cases. And then I would paint them on the walls too. So there were these subtle hints. Is it just a roll of the dice, or does God play dice with the universe?
Interesting. And you had a bunch of other elements incorporated in that exhibition. I was reading up on it. I mean, there was a dancing element and a dance floor. And what else was included in that exhibition?
Well, there were dance costumes that you could put on, and there's dance steps. There were fish tanks. So we had living creatures. In the Denver Museum of Nature, we rolled in a Volvo, and Charles Darwin driving it. I'm all about bad puns, so we called it the Evolvo. Here was this surreal, weird humor in a natural history museum, but it was all driven and inspired by science and also vetted by scientists, so that anything that was in the exhibit, there was a point to the humor. It wasn't random, but even the dice that were decorating the walls. Sometimes you don't spell it out enough. That's the beauty of art. And the best art is the most enigmatic, those that don't just hammer you over the head. There's something unique about it or mysterious about it that draws you in. And you can interpret it in different ways. So it's not just a sign. Somebody said, art says what we cannot say. Music does the same thing. So it's undefinable, really. If you look at a piece of art, it works or it doesn't. It kills it almost if you over-explain it. Mm-hmm. But I do like to get people tuned into the science. It's inspiring it.
You have a pretty significant fossil collection. While a lot of your images do have this humorous element to them, the actual source material comes from a very scientific and accurate place, plus being just around fish in day-to-day life. So that's kind of a beautiful marriage.
Well, thanks. But yet there's elements of Mad Magazine and Python-esque humor and or cultural references and rock and roll and that kind of thing. So basically a reflection of my life and what I do. I'm a musician of sorts. It took me a long time to be totally comfortable with the label of being an artist. I used to I'm an artist. You kind of almost apologize. That's what I am. But when I say I'm a musician, I always kind of wince a little bit. I'm not that good of a musician, but anyways, more of a punk rock attitude. And I do have a band. When you're a creative, as they say, you don't know what's going to come out of the box. Sometimes I go out to the studio and I've got guitars out there too. And maybe it's a day that I draw a little bit, but then I kind of noodle around with the song idea and to write lyrics and the occasional poem, that kind of thing. Fragments from a song can end up being a title of a painting or a t-shirt slogan. So like fish worship, is it wrong? Is a scratchboard image that I did. And it's an absurd, just struck me one day, that phrase, that I don't know where it came from. My recovering Catholic kind of childhood, and just this image of a fish and all these hands kind of worshiping it. And it was also me putting myself on the couch. What is it with this fish thing? Fish worship, is it wrong? And I thought that's never going to sell as a t-shirt. But in a way, it was saying what you can't say, really, which is there's other people out there with this same problem that you and I have, Anne. We're just kind of obsessed with fish. And what's with that? Once I did that, I kept thinking, well, that's maybe the title of a song. I should write a song that goes with that phrase. And it'd be cool to have that image up there and then have a song that goes deeper into what fish worship is, all the things, the aspects of it. So that's where the creativity comes in. So I do what I love, but I try to put it into the real world so I can make a living doing what I do. So you don't want to operate in a vacuum. If you're a musician, you want an audience. And if you're an artist, I do it for myself, but I want an audience. Over the years, I've gained that audience. I mean, I picked up that crayon at age 4, and, there was one period in my life, maybe when I was 13, when I thought I wanted to be a pilot for some reason. But then, no, I got rid of that idea, and I was back on track. I want to make a living as an artist. It was my childhood superpower, if you will. And so I was determined to do that. And I had a lot of day jobs, waited tables, bartender, all kinds of stuff, as I worked my way through college. And, I taught, but I wanted to end up making art that when you looked at one of my images, you knew it was my art.
That's not easy to do.
We all are sponges, and especially in your student phase, you kind of glom on to a look or style that's not your own. You're trying them on. And then from them, you take those things and you begin to make it your own. And so I've done that. My influencers are literally on my sleeve, tattoos and things. And I began to kind of look at some of my art now and pick it apart and see some of the direct influences. But it's a smorgasbord, and you take a little of this, a little of that, a little bit of Andy Warhol, a little bit of Peter Bruegel and Hieronymus Bosch, and mix it up with Mad Magazine and Art Crumb, and throw in some Magritte, maybe a dash of Dali, and then throw in Zap Comics and that kind of thing. So in New Mexico, you've got a really thriving art ecosystem there that's just like pretty amazing. I've traveled through there a few times. I had a show once, and only one exhibit ever in New Mexico, and it was at the Natural History Museum there in Albuquerque years ago, but it was on a particular kind of prehistoric shark. I'm sure you caught it.
I wish I did. And a lot of your exhibitions have been at natural history museums.
That was the niche that I landed in. The novelty of what I ended up doing was this was a fine artist let loose in the Natural History Museum. I had my fine art sensibility, drawing and whatever creative juices I had going at the time, and was in a natural history setting. I went to art school, and then my training was to, go to a gallery, have gallery exhibits. That was the goal, is to be either a teacher or a gallery artist. In the 70s, when I was in art school, and then in the 80s, and when I got my master's degree, that was still like you taught, or you went the gallery route. Commercial art wasn't even considered art. It was commercials, graphic design. It wasn't serious art. And there was never any training in any sort of business or licensing or copyrights or clues that might actually help you make a living as an artist. So I actually have done a talk on all the things I wish that I'd learned in art school that they never taught me. If I was to go back and teach now at this late stage in my life, I would certainly have classes in that kind of thing, and licensing your art, trademarking what to do when somebody's appropriated your image, but also what museum exhibits are about, how you go about getting a museum exhibit, and the kind of deals that you can cut with museums. They don't teach you any of that. It was a lifetime of just doing this stuff, but looking back, it's like I darn it, I wish that there was at least some kind of real world class that, all right, listen, kids, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get out of art school and there you are. Then what? Art school enrollment is plummeting. College enrollment is plummeting. I fear for the planet, really, because I think it's a wonderful thing. It's super valuable. And when there's somebody who's like, should I go to art college? People have asked me that, or what's the point of it? Or will I ever make a living as an artist? I encourage them to, because you can never lose with education. And I tell them this, and sure, your parents are probably freaking out because you want to go to art school. How's my kid ever going to make a living? Well, the answer is, Mom, Dad, just look around you. Just about everything around you is informed by some sort of artistic decision at some level. So, the label on the can of soup that Warhol pointed out, the graphic design of the magazine, the billboard that you look at, the films that you watch, everything, the paint that you put on your wall. We are bombarded with imagery everywhere. And good God, the world is also content hungry. Give me the next thing. But you've got to have your wits about you and pay attention to the bottom line. But if you don't have the ambition gene, it's going to be really tough. You could be a bleeding genius, but the world may never find you or come to your door. If you're going to do a painting or write a song, it takes a lot of guts to make that phone call or go to the gallery and say, hey, I've got something worth looking at. But you've got to do good work, but also promote that work.
You have to wear a lot of hats.
Yeah. And there's also a certain sense of shame that we have in somebody who promotes themselves. Narcissistic people out of control, and we know of them. But you've got to have that self-confidence, and you have to promote yourself. Not shameless self-promotion, it's fearless self-promotion.
Mm-hmm.
You need to gather your strength and say, I've got this thing that I think is worth looking at. To get up in front of a stage and play a song that I wrote this song, that's terrifying. Yeah.
How else is anybody going to know? A lot of the things you're saying and a lot of your interests over time just really resonate with me. And I wonder if we're related.
You're Irish?
I am. Last name's Kelly.
You have red hair?
Kind of reddish, brownish.
This used to be red. You got a DNA test that we could be related.
You have some scientist friends. It's interesting. The way I actually found your work is on my friend's snowboard.
Oh, cool.
My friend, who's also named Ray Valdez, I was doing an episode on other ways that art is disseminated, and I was on the chairlift with him, and he had his LibTech snowboard with your art on it.
Oh, yeah, LibTech.
And I was like, well, wait, whose art is this? And I filmed something with him talking on the lift, and then I went home that night. And LibTech's pretty good at actually saying who the artist is.
They've been absolutely fabulous to work with. They approached me years ago, and their art director, Anne, approached me, just email out of the blue saying, hey, we're a snowboard company and we like what you do. And there's one of our writers really likes your work. Ejak, he's a pretty well-known snowboarder, and he's got some Alaskan roots himself. And he'd seen my stuff when, he's growing up. I'm kind of part of the cultural scene up here. And so LibTech approached me about using my work. And there's a great designer there. She just kind of looks through my stuff, and she does a remix of it, elements. And she has that eye. And I love seeing what a good designer can do. I do my own kind of design work too, but a really good designer, graphic designer, those people I used to shun in art school, because they weren't real artists. So she designs the boards, but takes my art and knows how to frame it on there. Pretty much every year, I'm kind of one of their brands with Ejak, and my boards are associated with him.
So that was how I found the work. You also have a podcast. Yours is called Paleo Nerds.
Indeed it is. When the pandemic hit the planet, those many years ago.
Back in 2020.
In 2020, I have a friend who is a ventriloquist, of all things. He's an amazing ventriloquist. He can have 5 or 6 of his puppetronics, his robot puppets going at once, and he's doing all the voices. He's a big deal down in Australia, where he's a household name. His name is David Strassman. He just so happened to have a house up here in Ketchikan as well. Anyways, his tour was canceled down under, so he had nothing to do, rattling around the house. And he knew about these things called podcasts, and was an avid listener to a number of sciencey podcasts. And I'm admittedly very much a boomer, and I kind of had a vague sense of what podcasts were. Anyways, Dave called up and said, let's do a podcast. So we do it for the fun and the love of it. There's no commercial aspect to it whatsoever. Whenever we talk about, well, maybe we should get a sponsor or we should try to, well, then it becomes a real job. And I don't want a real job. So when we first started out, we're doing episodes, weekly episodes for a while. And then it was like, yikes.
A
And then
lot.
putting them, and it's a lot. Yeah. So now we've slowed it down. We're still doing it though. So we're still committed. And he's back on tour again. But anyways, we do that. And it's two of us interviewing one person. It can be a little crazy sometimes, but we edited it down, or Dave edits it down. And all the music in it is original. It's either my music or my son's music or friends' music. So it's all original stuff. And Dave throws in a few sound effects, so they're pretty produced. And then we have them on some Alaska public radio stations. We have 56 episodes so far. Got 2 in the can right now. 95% of them in paleontologists. I like to stretch it out a little bit. Done fellow artists, paleo artists, a couple of photographers, and one filmmaker. Actually, we did do one on ratfish once with it, an ichthyologist. But yeah, it's a fun thing. So check them out, paleonerds.com.
And speaking of ratfish, your band is the Ratfish Wranglers.
If you know any ratfish that need wrangling, you can call on us.
I'll be on the lookout.
But yeah, the Ratfish Wranglers, there's 3 of us at the core of it. When I first got to Ketchikan, one of my first jobs just to keep me doing out in the studio is I was a substitute teacher at the high school. And I was, not too much older than the students, fresh out of grad school. But there's this one student in particular who's kind of snarky and witty, and he had a band, and I liked what they were doing. They were doing a radio show, and he had a real good sense of humor. And basically, it was the high school substitute teacher saying, "Oh, you got a cool band. Can I be in your band?" Which is maybe not appropriate. I don't know. But that summer, he had graduated, and we got together, and actually ever since, it's been 35 years now. So Russell Wodehouse is his name. He and I write songs together or independently. But then there's a vocalist in our band, Shauna Lee, who's an amazing vocalist. She can bring tears to people's eyes with her beautiful voice. My son drums with us. He's got his own band. Patrick Troll's his name. Bass player Chaz Gist, an amazing guitarist, Cullen McCormick. Austin Hayes sometimes drums with us. We have done a little bit of touring here and there, mostly in Alaska and down in the Northwest. So what you see in my art is what you get in the music.
There's some videos I found on YouTube. I was listening to a song before we started chatting. It was Cannery Girl.
I'm singing in that, but I didn't want to be in the music video. And I thought my son, Patrick, would look better in the music video. So he's lip syncing. One of my first jobs here was fishmonging, but I also did work on what we call the slime line at the local cannery. There is a whole scene and the culture there. My wife was a cannery girl once upon a time, not the cannery I worked in, but I ended up marrying a cannery girl. The direct influence, the Rolling Stones have a song called Factory Girl. Well, I took that, kind of skewed it. Jagger and Richards have not contacted me with their attorneys yet, but it's modified. It's inspired by them. Mark Osborne did the film, and it's quite fun.
I really enjoyed it.
Thanks. Brent came in and choreographed too. She's actually a professional choreographer. So
all of the different things are connected, and why not let one medium inspire the next?
And what happens on college campuses, there's these different buildings for these different disciplines, and science is over here, and the music department is over here, and the art department's over there, and the mathematics department's over there. And really, you got to break down those barriers. And with a true creative type, you're just hitting on whatever comes to you. And I remember reading a quote that Steve Martin said, the comedian, and he's a musician as well, but he was writing a critique of some music, but writing about music is like dancing about architecture. Like, yeah, why not dance about architecture? I mean, you have to do that. Science is art. Art is science. There should be overlap, and we should not keep everything compartmentalized. You should be a Renaissance person. We can all specialize in things that we're really good at. That said, I should be a much better handyman. I'm fairly useless around the house in terms of practical things. When something breaks, call the shop. I like to cook, things I'm good at.
Well, you can always call the guy that's business card says handyman, and maybe you can trade him a meal or a print.
You should try that, especially when the plumbing bill is really high. It's like, I get this art, man. They're really savvy, handyman. They'll go for it.
So when you do you cook from recipes, or do you just make things up?
Usually kind of riff on things, make things up, but recipes are good starting points. There's certain things I do and other things my wife Michelle does that, I don't go near. I'm not going to make a cake. Comes to fish and meat, that's kind of what I do.
You have a fossil collection. I'm curious about the fossils.
They're on the shelves everywhere. Strange natural history objects. When I moved to Southeast Alaska, I thought this was maybe a fossil deprived kind of place. I always think of fossils being in places like the Gobi Desert or out in the deserts of Arizona or New Mexico. But one of the mantras that I've learned hanging out with my paleontologist friends is that fossils really are everywhere. And once you tune into the deep history of the earth, there's different kinds of fossils. They're not just all big old dinosaur bones. So I do have a lot of fossils from Southeast Alaska now. Many of them are like fossilized coral and or brachiopods. And I've been lucky enough to collect some vertebrates here and there, have all the permits. They're on public lands. A lot of natural history objects, like I said, including pickled fish. But in our house where the family lives, there are some fossils, but it's out of control out in my studio. Tons. The driveway is lined with them. And as you go up the studio, there's piles of rocks and just cool rocks too. It's not all just fossils.
Per your studio tour, you had mentioned your studio was more the analog place and the house was more of the digital place. So if you need to do something digital, you go to the house.
The drawing and the painting happens out there, and I'm not streaming music out there. I have a big music collection. I spent hundreds, thousands of dollars really on, vinyl and CDs and cassette tapes over the years. What am I going to do? Junk all that? No. Just go discover it again, shuffle them around or whatever. But don't want to have any streaming ability out there. The phone is bad enough. I want to keep it analog. I don't like sitting in front of the computer for too long. And I'm kind of forced to do digital stuff, but I enjoy that as well. But it's an entirely different thing. My Wacom tablet is in here. And I have my pen and ink drawings. I'm not doing everything on the computer. I do pen and ink, pencil, then pen and ink, scan it, then throw it into Photoshop. I hire a colorist to help me out. Grace Freeman's doing phenomenal stuff. And sometimes my buddy Memo Haragi, I'll hire him to help do the digital coloring. But I do the digital coloring as well, and or the scanning and then the tweaking of all the stuff. And that's staring at a computer screen is so much different than tactile drawing and making a mess. I just don't want the studio space to be invaded by that. I'm just going to be analog till the day I die. I intentionally separate them. I remember, when Photoshop came along, and now there's AI programs that are generating art.
A friend was showing me that the other day. You could say fish and dice and it would make that art for you, which is wild.
Fish art surreal. So they have these identity crises like, okay, what do I do now if machines are doing all that? And I remember that with Photoshop is like, do I have to learn this? I remember the very first time I approached a computer, that was how you were getting data. And I did not want to go near these computer things. How old I am, but I wanted to find a book in the library. And the library said, card catalog is now on a computer. So I just find them completely different sensory experiences. And I want to keep the tactile no matter what. Hence, analog studio, digital in the house.
I think that's cool that you physically separate them.
And I've done that where I've just lived with my art. And no, it's really good to keep it in another space that you can walk away from. Preferably in another building. When I first moved to Ketchikan, my studio was in the cannery building. I mean, talk about your fish invading. I was upstairs in the cannery, and then for a number of years, and then I actually had a studio in an old cannery right on the water, which was phenomenal, but funky. I had a studio there for 10 years, and then I was lucky enough or worked hard enough, really, I should say, to build my own studio. And when I say to build it, once again, I'm not the handyman. I got my architect friend to help me design it. I wanted these big walls so I could do big paintings, but then I wanted a lot of light so I didn't go insane from depression in the rain. So I could have a lot of windows. We depressive artist types, you need that light because we tend to go to dark places, we creatives. But yeah, then I had my own space and it's great. And for the first few years, it did not have a bathroom. Then I was finally afforded to add a bathroom onto it. Completely self-contained.
One step at a time. Like you said, you have to be driven and passionate about the thing.
You got to show up to work. And that's what I do. I show up to work. I go a little bonkers if I don't have my studio time. I get resentful of the computer when the emails pile up too much or the digital coloring piles up too much. And I have to power through it because I just long to be out in the studio, puttering around, doing some drawings, making a mess.
You have have done so many amazing things, and you are a modest person, which I appreciate. What hasn't come up is your collaboration with Dr. Kurt Johnson. Have you got a collective Guggenheim together for a book that you worked on?
Yeah, it's kind of a unique thing. There are not a lot of duo Guggenheims that are given out. We got a book advance, a small book advance to do Cruising the Fossil Free, which our first book together came out in 2007, I believe. We wanted to do another book. The first book was basically about the Rocky Mountain states and just a sliver of New Mexico. I'm sorry, we didn't do the whole state, but we covered a lot of territory and drove around, and we wanted to do it again for the West Coast, because that's where I live. I'm on the Northwest coast, the far Northwest coast. Just this whole great story out here. So we got an advance, but it was a very modest book advance. So we needed money to support our plane trips and our travel to the fossil sites and to the museums and to go have some fossiling adventures. So we did a joint application to the Guggenheim, and we got it. And it's not an easy thing to do, but we had to, do all the paperwork, and it was phenomenal because we had the Googie dollars, is what we said. We each bought Nikon cameras, high-res cameras. We're able to afford some airplane trips and hotels and, that kind of thing. Basically, it was a travel budget, which was great to underwrite that. Guggenheim Foundation is a phenomenal thing, and every artist, creative type should think about it, or scientist, whatever. It's a phenomenal thing our country has. But we use the Guggenheim money to go to fossil sites, and the most extreme one was in our last big trip was to fly to the Colville River, which is above the Arctic Circle, way up in the northern edge of Alaska, in the tundra. Remote place, fly hundreds of miles out in a tiny airplane and land on a gravel strip and go hunt for dinosaurs in Alaska. There are great dinosaur finds here, but they're in the northernmost unreachable portion of Alaska. So we were able to do that. Went with paleontologists, scientists. We weren't just touring around. They were out there to do some exploring, but also some collecting. And I found my Nanuqsaurus tooth, which is a type of Tyrannosaurus. It's Alaska's Tyrannosaurus, if you will. And I found a tooth of one, and they're pretty rare. I was 58 then, a younger man, and I wept. I seriously did.
I would imagine. An experience.
Just a tooth, but it was like, damn, man, I finally found it. But yeah, there's a lot of dinosaur bones up there. We found a lot of duck-billed dinosaur bones, which are very, very common. But Kirk found a raptor tooth, a Troodon tooth, but then that evolved into a museum exhibit and the book, Cruising the Fossil Coastline. About 7 years in the first book and then 10 years on the second book. But also during the course of that, Kirk's career kept moving along and my career kept moving along, and I'm feeding the t-shirt monster, as it were, so we squeeze these things in, produce all this work. And during the course of that, he became the director of the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, which is no small accomplishment. I've known him for almost 30 years now. I knew early on that the man was brilliant, and it was really a privilege to be hanging out with this guy. Like having my own personal PhD, just as we drove thousands. We've actually literally probably gone around the world now, driving, spent a lot of time in cars and in cafes. It's been a wonderful friendship. So I say that everybody should be in a band, not just a musical band. Band is a bond, and bond is, formed of friendship. And the people I'm with in my band are, friends. But all these scientists that I work with, I basically, become friends with them. And this podcast is a one-on-one, genuine relationships. I'm schooled in art, and I'm practiced a bit in science. I haven't really done scientific papers, but I've hung out with scientists. I've influenced scientists. Kirk he was in undergrad school. He was a double major, and his other major besides geology was art. I didn't pay too much attention to science much as I should have in college, but I was also doing theater and literature, and it was a liberal arts education on top of the, studio arts. But you find those things in other people that kind of, complete you, or that you can relate to. Your interests overlaps enough that I'm interested enough in the science that, I can speak science with them. I can speak to PhDs. They're regular people. I'm writing with writers like Brad Mattson and, John Straley. These are friends of mine. And Susan Ewing did a book about the buzzsaw shark, Helicoprion. Anyways, just creative types.
When I started making the show, it was all visual arts, and then I kind of delved into musicians, and then there were scientists. All of a sudden, I didn't see the difference.
Good. Blur those lines, smudge it.
Exactly. And so I don't want to keep you on the computer too much longer, but I do have to ask about music you listen to. And I assume you're a Pink Floyd fan.
A Floydian, but
There was the Dark Side of the Loon.
it's been in my sketchbook for 20 years and I finally got around to doing it as a shirt. Always wanted to do it and it's been doing pretty well. I have eclectic tastes, but basically alternative rock and roll. I'm true to my hippie heritage, Floyd and Zeppelin and Stones and Beatles and all that good stuff, and Donovan, and I'm just inspired by new stuff all the time. Radiohead and lots of stuff. Bon Iver, Fleet Foxes, my son's band, which is Whiskey Class, Americana.
It's Whiskey Class?
Whiskey Class, yes. He's in a band with a woman by the name of Liz Snyder, and there's a couple other musicians in the band. They're doing great. They're doing really cool stuff. My niece, Erin Heist, and her husband, Andrew Heist, are Americana brass musicians. And Erin just released her first album this year. And it's really an incredible album. These are all on Spotify, too. You can check them out. And yeah, there's a great music scene here in Ketchikan and actually all throughout Alaska. And I helped get a music festival going 10 years ago. This is the 11th year, and it's called Salmon Fest. It's up in Ninilchik, Alaska. I helped do some of the visual art that got it going back in the day, and David Stearns, Jim Stearns are running it now, but that's still going strong and it's sold out this year. So it's a really cool thing. It's a music festival, but art is in there. And then activist politics to protect the salmon, to promote salmon and celebrate salmon, the habitat issues, to protect them, keep the fisheries sustainable, which it is here in Alaska. So promoting it as well.
What time of year is Salmon Fest?
First weekend in August. Erin Heiss played this year. That was her first Salmon Fest, which was really cool. I did not make it this year, but I have a lifetime pass now, so. The logo for the festival is mine, and I let the festival use the art now for the festival. So in exchange, I got a lifetime pass.
Well, maybe Salmon Fest 2023, I will show up because that sounds
okay. It's a very cool thing. Check it out. Wonderful festival.
Time travel is another Art in the Raw question. If you could time travel, do you know just on the fly where that would be?
In our podcast, we ask that of everybody.
Really?
It's a paleo show, so it's always how deep back into the past you want to go. I had Kirk Johnson on it this last time, and he tricked us, and he wanted to go into the future, the rascal, but for very important reasons. I would encourage you to check out our song, Time Traveling with the Shovel. Probably one of our catchiest tunes, the bluegrass version in particular, Time Traveling with the Shovel. So there's two versions of it, but I really like the bluegrassy one that's on the Fish Worship album. Time Traveling with the Shovel. Dancing with the devil, but the devil you don't know. Anyways, I would like to go back to the Devonian, and I'd like to see that first fish crawling ashore going, wait, what is this place? Maybe someday my kin, my people, my fish descendants could have a cheeseburger someday. So looking around, then I think I'll stay. So back in the Devonian, which was a radically different place. What an inventive time it was. It's called the Age of Fishes, so why wouldn't Ray Troll want to go there? It's called the Age of Fishes because there's such diversity in the fish world. There's a lot of lineages that are completely gone, but that's when our lobe-finned fishy ancestors did make that transition to land, breathing and colonizing this brave new world called land, breathing oxygen. That's what I want to see. Giant insects and sea scorpions and armored fish, and then these weird fish with bones in their flippers, in their fins, as it were, I should say, in their pectoral fins, and then their pelvic fins, and et cetera, et cetera. So there you go.
So if you did have to go into the future, I have to know.
I would say there's certain critical points that we are fast approaching, and I'd be very curious to see what it's like. And I'd just like to go 100 years down the road here. So I will not be able to live in the year 2122, and I'd be very curious to see that, and whether or not we heeded our warnings that all the scientists are telling us, and whether or not the world is completely drowned in plastic and 110 degrees everywhere in the world, and it's 150 degrees Fahrenheit at the equator, because we're headed there, folks. I'm guilty of being a consumer. Every time I open up a plastic container, it's like, what the hell are we doing? Every time I drive my car, it's like, well, so yeah, I'd like to see if we're still here. On one of the recent episodes of Paleo Nerds, we had a scientist on by the name of Henry G. He's an editor of the major science magazine, the science journal in the world, Nature. And Henry doesn't give us much time at all, only a few thousand years, because he thinks we've already pulled the trigger, the thing that's called extinction debt. So if you pull the trigger and you overextend yourself in an environment, you've only got so long before you're gone. And you can see this happen in the fossil record with different creatures. And so extinction debt, have we already pulled the trigger on that? I asked Henry, he just wrote a wonderful book called A Short History of Life in 12 Pithy Chapters, something to that effect. Just the entire history of life in 12 short chapters. But then, he predicts into the future what's going to happen too with that. But I asked Henry to, instead of 12 chapters, can you give me the entire history of life and into the future in less than 5 minutes? Go. And so he sent me a recording in less than 5 minutes. My son and I basically put some music behind it, took Henry's voice and took some of my art. And you can watch that and learn about how life evolved on this planet, but also where it's going and where we're at now, and how it's going to end. So it's all there. I'll send you the link.
Please do. I've been meaning to actually delve more into some of your paleo podcasts. Now that I know the time travel questions in there.
Dave asked a big question, this sort of big philosophical question. For that, I do the sort of, hey, where would you want to time travel to? That'd be an interesting thing that each one to write it out, where they want to go, and then do a graph.
I don't know if this actually makes sense, but because I've been asking that same question, maybe we could randomly sync up some of these answers. Just a thought.
If you're talking to artists, they want to go back to historic times of some sort.
I found a pretty wide range of different answers.
Hang out with Van Gogh. Don't do it.
Maybe let's wrap up with your thoughts on puns and cheeseburgers.
Puns and cheeseburgers. Puns have been characterized as the lowest form of humor, and I'm okay with that. I am a ratfish lover, so bottom feeder. Puns, they can be punny, and I can't turn it off if I hear a turn of phrase or whatever. My brain just starts associating. It's a natural thing, and the more you've grown, maybe even the better they are. And then cheeseburgers. Why cheeseburgers? I like a good veggie burger, and the Impossible burgers are pretty good. But it's America, I do love a good cheeseburger. Kind of started in my high school days and hanging out at a burger joint, King's X in Wichita, Kansas. And it was just the place we hung out late at night. I mean, into the wee hours, a 24-hour hamburger joint, and with the big burger. And I remember Steve Miller Band, Living in the USA, the last line in that song, somebody give me a cheeseburger. And I always thought, somebody give me a cheeseburger. I just love that little line. So anyways, they show up in my work. My son has taken it to the next level, and he's actually turned it into a religion. It's called Burger Church. It's kind of his DJ handle name, or his company name too, is Burger Church. And he loves a good cheeseburger too. And his point is that when you're eating a cheeseburger, you're happy. So why not be happy? Eat a burger. Be a veggie burger. Even better.
Make some art. Make some music.
Cheeseburger drippings.
All of those things. Do you have any shout outs other than your son?
My daughter, Karina, she's in Portland. Shout out to her. She's been in a band too, but she's becoming a science teacher, high school science teacher. She's working on her master's degree right now. But I could not do this without my beautiful wife, Michelle, who's wandered into the house from working at the Soho Coho Gallery for 30 years. Partnering well in life certainly makes a huge difference in one's life.
Thank her for letting us borrow you.
And we gotta start. I'm gonna make some sockeye salmon for dinner tonight.
That sounds amazing.
I'm gonna do some miso mayo on it and bake it. Secret thing, just do that. Put some miso in your mayo, slather down your fish, bake it at 425. Maybe do a little broil at the end.
That sounds amazing. I wish I had those ingredients because I'm about to cook dinner as well.
You can actually get pretty good sockeye at your local Walmarts even. It's fresh frozen by an Alaskan fisherman. So anyways, great talking to you, Ann, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much, Ray, for talking tonight. I really enjoyed meeting you. Had looked forward to it for a while. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, and come to Alaska sometime and see it in person.
I think I'm going to have to.
Got to.
And until then, have a great night.
All right. Peace out. Thanks.
Thanks for watching Art in the Raw, conversations with creative people. I hope you enjoyed meeting artist Ray Troll. I sure did. Again, if you're into fun and free art education, Tell like-minded friends, like, comment, subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Have a good night, y'all. Art in the Raw, conversations with creative. This is my co-host, Wombat. Woo!